The Galactic Council chambers shimmered with sterile brilliance, suspended in the vacuum between stars. 78 species, each older and more advanced than Earth, filled their polished obsidian seats. Every delegate radiated the confidence of civilizations that had survived extinction-level wars, technological singularities, and interstellar empires. Their unity was rare, forged not by peace but by shared fear, a single world spiraling out of control on the fringes of known space. Earth. What began as curiosity had turned into concern. Surveillance drones placed near the Sol system had captured unsettling footage. Primitive by galactic standards, humans had developed nuclear energy within a blink of cosmic time, cracked genetic manipulation soon after, and built artificial intelligence that rivaled the computational structures of ancient silicon mines. Worse, they applied these tools not for harmony but to wage war on themselves, with increasing efficiency. They fought fiercely, creatively, and without hesitation. When one method failed, they built two more. They adapted. They endured. They thrived through catastrophe. In simulation after simulation, their projected timelines ended with galaxy-wide instability. It wasn't their weapons that troubled the Council. It was their psychology. Species after species presented findings. Human emotion was volatile, and paradoxically, it was their greatest strength. Hope could push them through hopeless wars. Rage made them stand even when logic dictated surrender. Loss didn't weaken them, it sharpened them. The most damning analysis came from the Sile, a telepathic race unable to decipher the full emotional bandwidth of the human mind. "There is noise," their ambassador whispered. "There is something unquantifiable in them. Something that does not bend." The final vote was cast in silence. Enslavement, not eradication. Extermination would martyr them in their own mythos. Enslavement would dismantle the core of their pride, reduce their legend into submission. A lesson for the rest of the young species developing too quickly. Protocols were signed. Class Delta Containment Strategy. Human species to be subdued and integrated into galactic servitude. The vote was unanimous. No dissent. No hesitation. The Council sent the Subjugation Armada, comprised of ships that once broke empires. These were not mere warships, they were mobile civilizations of control. Planetary shields, neurochemical suppressors, gravitic dominators, every technology perfected through centuries of occupation. They did not announce their arrival. The first wave darkened Earth's orbit, casting silent shadows over a planet unaware of what approached. Diplomatic channels were bypassed. No warnings, no ultimatums. This wasn't war. It was procedure. Within minutes, the world's satellites blinked into static. Global power grids failed. Electromagnetic pulses surged through cities. Human aircraft dropped from the sky. Firewalls melted under alien code. The defenses they had built for each other were useless now. Drones dropped gas over population centers, non-lethal, perfectly calibrated to pacify without damage. Millions collapsed in the streets, asleep before they understood they were under attack. Automated systems neutralized military targets with precision. No bombs. No unnecessary force. Control, not chaos. Resistance was anticipated and accounted for. Ground troops never deployed en masse. Instead, atmospheric suppressors altered human hormonal balances. Aggression became confusion. Willpower dulled. Neuroleashes were fitted to population clusters. Thought patterns mapped. Rebellious clusters isolated, studied. Within 48 hours, Earth belonged to the Galactic Federation. The Council watched from afar, satisfied. They observed footage of once proud humans crawling from rubble to kneel before machines they did not understand. It confirmed their calculations. There would not be a problem now. The humans were dispersed, filtered into every tier of the Federation's labor structure. Some were sold to academic institutions for research. Others became workforce in deep space industries, prized for their endurance and adaptability. The rest remained on Earth, the planet repurposed as a containment and monitoring facility. Entire continents were restructured to optimize behavior reprogramming. Every record of resistance was erased. Every cultural monument stripped of significance. Religion, philosophy, identity, broken down and replaced. Earth was no longer a world. It was a lesson. The Council had acted decisively. Efficiently. Justly, they told themselves. But beneath the protocols and perfect reports, there lingered a detail too small for most to notice. In multiple surveillance clips, even with psychic dampeners and behavioral controls, some humans did not kneel. Faces obscured. Records scrambled. Glitches, the analysts claimed. Camera malfunctions. But one SIL archivist disagreed. There are patterns, he whispered, eyes locked on a frozen frame, a lone figure standing upright while all others bowed. They're watching. Waiting. Learning. His warning never reached the Council. Because by then, the galaxy had already moved on. 78 species, proud and ancient, returned to their seats of power, content in their triumph. Earth had been subdued. Humanity had been tamed. They believed the story was over. They never realized it had just begun. Earth did not fall in fire, but in silence. The skies remained blue, the oceans calm, the cities intact. There were no craters, no mushroom clouds, only stillness. The kind that settles in a graveyard. Neuropacifiers blanketed entire cities. Invisible frequencies recalibrated human perception, fogging instincts, clouding thought. Soldiers dropped their weapons mid-sentence, their minds hollowed by synthetic peace. Communications never resumed. World leaders disappeared into quiet containment, or accepted compliance under mental sedation. In less than a week, the Earth's command structure ceased to exist. No orders were given. No rallying cries sounded. Civilian centers became holding zones. Families were scanned, categorized, and assigned roles. Children were split from parents based on adaptability ratings. Languages were archived, not preserved. Culture became irrelevant. The planetary identity of human was rewritten in data sheets and standard templates. Humans were not tortured. There was no need. They were processed, like data, like cattle. Federation overseers installed implant nodes across global population hubs. Neurorains delivered compliance signals directly into the cortex. Thoughts that strayed toward rebellion were neutralized before they formed. Pain wasn't used. Indifference was more effective. Humans were trained to forget why resistance even mattered. In research sectors, select groups were retained for study. Their emotional volatility fascinated xenopsychologists. Rage, grief, passion, raw, unpredictable variables that defied pattern recognition. Thousands of test subjects cycled through artificial simulations to monitor instinctual reactions. Few passed. Most simply endured. Elsewhere, humans worked. Factories beneath Mars' surface. Biofarms in orbit of toxic gas giants. Ship repair yards on hollowed moons. They adapted with disturbing speed, learning alien technology faster than projected. Several species raised internal objections. Warnings about human ingenuity surfaced. But these were dismissed. Observers called it mimicry, not understanding. No species had ever adapted under occupation with such precision. Yet Earth's surface began to change in subtle ways. Despite heavy oversight, unauthorized symbols began appearing, carved into stone, hidden in repair circuits, drawn into dirt behind buildings. Eyes. Fire. Chains being broken. Overseers removed them. But they returned. In the containment camps, whispers spread in dozens of languages, names of vanished families who were now rumored to live beyond the reach of the neurogrid. Unregistered individuals who could not be tracked. They were dismissed as delusions. Psychological coping mechanisms. No alarms were triggered. A quiet shift took place within the workforce. In every sector, select humans began to show unusual behavior. They followed orders, but they watched. They learned Federation routines, guard schedules, system protocols. Their productivity increased just enough to avoid attention, but their eyes stopped looking afraid. They weren't resisting. They were observing. Then came the first anomaly. An orbital refinery malfunctioned, killing hundreds. Initial reports blamed mechanical failure. But internal investigations revealed a tampered coolant system, modified in a way requiring deep understanding of alien engineering. The culprit was never found. Incidents multiplied. Small. Inconclusive. A transport route rerouted by falsified coordinates. A patrol drone lured into a meteor storm. A databank erased entirely and overwritten with human poetry. Random, meaningless acts, or so it seemed. The Council called for re-evaluation. Analysts reviewed over 1.2 billion human behavioral logs. Patterns emerged: distributed knowledge networks, decentralized coordination, intentional obfuscation. It was impossible. No single node of control existed. Yet the activity was undeniably coordinated. When questioned under truth filters, humans either failed to register the accusations or responded with genuine ignorance. They didn't know who was leading them. In many cases, they didn't even know they were part of something. But something was happening. In a penal outpost near Zeta Trianguli, a Psi warden went missing. His final log entry spoke of dreams within dreams, of voices in the dark whispering names he couldn't forget. They found his body in perfect condition, heart stopped, neural implant melted from within. His personal datapad displayed a phrase in ancient Terran English. We remember. The Council increased surveillance. More drones, more guards, tighter protocols. But it didn't matter. By then, Earth's children had already started reaching out across the void. Not to escape. To prepare. They were not organized in any traditional sense. No leaders. No manifestos. But within them had grown something no algorithm could predict, a collective memory of pain, stripped of illusion. They didn't need hope. They needed time. The overseers could not see it. But the humans in silence, in work, in study, were becoming fluent in every system, every weakness, every species that had voted for their chains. The Federation had enslaved Earth with the intent of erasing it. Instead, they had incubated something far worse. A species that had learned how to suffer and survive. It began with a power surge on a prison moon. 1 second, lights flickered. The next, the internal AI rewrote its own memory banks and opened every door. No alarms sounded. No guards were harmed. Every human prisoner was gone by the time security teams arrived. Not escaped, evaporated star. Traces of dark matter transit energy were found, technology no human was ever authorized to access. The incident was buried. 2 weeks later, a mining station in the asteroid belt lost all contact. An investigation found only silence. Machinery still ran. Lights were on. But the entire staff, human and non-human alike, had vanished. Logs indicated no breach. Internal cameras played a constant loop of static broken only by a single message. Pattern recognized. Across Federation space, errors began to mount. Not violent. Not destructive. But calculated. Maintenance bots were rerouted. Supply chains rerouted. New IDs appeared in systems, authenticated with perfect encryption. No one saw who created them. No one could track where they originated. A name began to circulate in intercepted transmissions, the Ember Protocol. No central authority. No known leader. No territory claimed. Just whispers and disruption. The Federation treated it as a rogue cell. They deployed cybernetic countermeasures, upgraded surveillance. It made no difference. Their defenses were built for armies and invasions, not ghosts. The humans were no longer resisting. They were infiltrating. They had learned the language of code, of stealth, of manipulation. Human slaves across sectors began to pass data through innocuous interfaces, repair requests, food orders, medical forms. Inside these channels, messages flowed. Blueprints. Guard rotations. Vulnerabilities. Every message was encoded in metaphors only other humans would understand. An overseer requested extra coolant for a reactor. The form included a children's rhyme in a human dialect long thought extinct. It translated into a map. That map pointed to an abandoned Federation weapons vault, which exploded 32 hours later. Humans had started building. They didn't construct ships and dry docks. They built in silence. Inside asteroids. Within the carcasses of dead ships. Their vessels didn't bear flags. They emitted no signals. They didn't match any known schematics. The hulls were jagged, sharp, designed not for intimidation but unpredictability. They were not beautiful. They were efficient. One by one, Federation listening posts went dark. Not destroyed, *emptied star. Their memory cores wiped clean. Their coordinates altered. Patrols sent to investigate vanished. What remained in their place were fragments of audio recordings. Human voices reading from books long forgotten: Oppenheimer, Marcus Aurelius, Sun Tzu. The psychological campaign had begun. Federation officers began reporting stress, insomnia, hallucinations, untraceable signals in their neural links. Entire species known for emotional stability began experiencing fear responses. It wasn't war. It was erosion. The humans struck with surgical cruelty. No large battles. No declarations. Only precision. A convoy carrying fuel for a dreadnought fleet was rerouted into a collapsing star. The dreadnoughts drifted dead and useless. A central AI for a communication relay suddenly believed it was on Earth and shut itself down in protest. Then came the first mass disappearance. A Federation transport with 14,000 human laborers vanished en route to a labor colony. No trace. No debris. No distress signal. The event wasn't just improbable, it was mathematically impossible under Federation tracking systems. One high-ranking official suggested internal betrayal. Another whispered the unthinkable: they had taken control of a full drive. Human agents began appearing in places no one expected, in Senate halls, research stations, even security enclaves. They never stayed long. Long enough to record, to steal, to alter. Long enough to leave a message. You taught us silence. We mastered it. Fear grew. Not from losses, but from uncertainty. No one knew how many humans had escaped the neural net. No one could say if their systems were still secure. Each error, each failure, each moment of static brought the same question: was this them? Among the elite, private communications revealed panic. The species that once voted for humanity's subjugation began turning on one another. Accusations of sabotage flew. Some began hiring mercenaries. Others fortified their worlds. All of them watched their skies. And still, no ships came. Because the humans weren't fighting for Earth. They were unmaking the Federation from within. By the time the Council officially acknowledged the Ember Protocol as a military threat, it was already irrelevant. What they faced was not an organization, not a rebellion, it was an evolution. A decentralized, distributed swarm of minds and methods forged by captivity, bonded by memory, and fueled by cold, mathematical revenge. They were not rising. They were already here. The first official retaliation order came too late. A full fleet was dispatched to Sector 12B, where human resistance had reportedly compromised a data nexus. 72 ships jumped in. None returned. Their final transmission was a single word, corrupted and fragmented. Learning. Debrief analysis yielded nothing. No wreckage, no survivors, only echoes in subspace. Panic took hold. The Council initiated Directive Aurum, a cross-species emergency doctrine not enacted for over 4 millennia. Massive reallocation of resources followed. Civilian projects were abandoned. Military production surged. Planets were militarized. Propaganda shifted overnight. No longer were humans spoken of as primitive. Now they were labeled existential threats, anomalies that had to be eradicated, not corrected. But it was already too late to change the narrative. By then, human operatives had embedded themselves within the digital core of the Federation. Their sabotage had become systemic. Entire memory archives were rewritten. Fleet routes were altered through fake AI directives. Automated factories began producing defective components. High Command believed their infrastructure was intact. It wasn't. Human agents didn't rely on brute force. They exploited assumptions. Every system in the Federation was built for trust, for order, for predictability. Humanity had learned to weaponize chaos. They didn't need to hold territory. They needed others to doubt that any territory was truly secure. Infiltration evolved into infection. The Ember Protocol restructured itself. It stopped following even internal patterns. Human cells began operating with complete autonomy, guided by a common language of patterns and priorities. They used mimicry, false identities, even gene modification. Some agents lived for years within the very institutions that once categorized them as labor stock. They built no monuments, issued no demands. They dismantled. Quietly. Irreversibly. The Calyx Accord, a tri-alliance formed to counter human expansion, collapsed within a month. Its command structure was compromised. Meeting rooms broadcast confidential plans to unknown sources. Private conversations were played back through internal comms during council votes. Trust eroded. Allies became suspects. Paranoia spread faster than any virus. Several species abandoned the outer colonies entirely. They viewed them as contaminated, too exposed to human infiltration. Automated defense grids were left behind, but no real protection remained. In their absence, strange patterns began to emerge in the deep void, beacons transmitting nothing but static pulses, orbital debris rearranged into recognizable human letters, statues of abstract humanoid forms built from Federation scrap. Psychological warfare at planetary scale. Then came the mutinies. Not led by humans, but by other species. Crews began to question orders. Lower ranks refused directives. Entire ships rerouted themselves and went dark. Investigations uncovered encrypted messages sent by humans posing as command AI, messages that resonated with oppressed or disillusioned minds across multiple species. The humans hadn't just attacked systems. They were rewriting ideologies. For every direct assault, 10 more ideological fractures appeared. Propaganda collapsed under the weight of its own contradictions. Stories of human endurance, of resistance, of liberation, even fictional, spread like wildfire. Species that had once agreed to Earth's subjugation now found themselves questioning their leaders. Because what humans had that others didn't was narrative. They didn't just fight. They remembered. They passed down pain as parable, loss as instruction. Every fallen ship, every erased name became another verse in a living mythology spreading far beyond Earth. And that story, unlike any council protocol, could not be deleted. Worse still, the humans had begun to speak not in threats, but in truths. Captured broadcasts included phrases like, asterisk, "We are the result of your decision." Asterisk and asterisk. "You didn't enslave us. You gave us purpose." Asterisk. These messages struck deeper than any weapon. The Federation had defined itself as the apex of stability, logic, and order. Now it faced an enemy forged entirely by the failure of its own certainty. The humans did not seek domination. They sought clarity. They wanted every species that voted to enslave them to understand the depth of their mistake, not through war, but through collapse. They wanted them to witness the undoing of their civilization, piece by piece, and know it wasn't a conquest. It was a correction. By the time the Council attempted peace negotiations, it was symbolic. No envoy returned. Not because they were killed, but because no human would acknowledge their authority. Humanity no longer saw them as rulers, or even enemies. They were irrelevant. Power had shifted. Quietly. Permanently. And none of them realized it until it was far too late. It ended not with fire, but with silence, an echo of how it began. The Federation's core worlds, once the center of galactic command, lit up with system failures. AI networks began rejecting commands from their creators. Orbital defenses refused to respond. Logistics chains collapsed under invisible pressure. In every command center, one question dominated: where are they? No human fleets arrived. No armies marched. What came instead was emptiness, files missing, power grids overridden, entire bureaucracies frozen by their own protocols rewritten by unseen hands. There was no declaration. No central attack. Simply a withdrawal of function. Power without control is nothing. That lesson, humans now taught without a word. The council dissolved in a single day. One faction turned on another, accusing betrayal. Surveillance records were falsified so completely that no one trusted what they saw. Half of the ruling body vanished without trace, their own security systems repurposed to contain them. The remaining species issued desperate messages into the void, pleading for terms, asking who to speak to. None were answered. Because there was no human leader. No authority to bribe, threaten, or negotiate with. What remained of humanity had become a distributed will. It moved through systems, languages, and thoughts like oxygen through fire. They had no interest in occupying what they dismantled. The collapse of the Federation wasn't a victory, it was a demonstration. And the message was simple: never again. Throughout the former slave sectors, control nodes went offline. The implants once embedded into human hosts melted harmlessly, their override codes erased. Neuropacifiers shorted out in synchronization. In less than 30 standard hours, every human across every system stood free unaided. Some woke from sedation. Others simply opened their eyes and walked out of cages that no longer had locks. No orders needed to be given. They already knew. Across dozens of worlds, humans stepped into the ruins not to rebuild the old, but to bury it. Federation technology was scrapped, repurposed. Cultural archives looted by alien scholars were restored. Entire languages, thought extinct, resurfaced in public broadcasts. Children born in captivity spoke names never permitted by registry codes. Not in defiance, but in reclamation. Species who had turned their backs now watched from afar, waiting for retaliation. None came. The humans did not demand tribute. They did not conquer. They offered no list of terms. Instead, they began teaching, not the way the Federation once did, through assimilation, but by demonstration. They repaired ecosystems that had been mined into decay. They restored habitats rendered sterile by overindustrialization. They opened channels, not for negotiation, but for warning. What had happened to the Federation could happen to anyone. The lesson was not about vengeance. It was about consequences. Those species who had pleaded mercy during the collapse received it, but not through forgiveness. Through irrelevance. The new human order simply ignored them. Their leaders were no longer consulted. Their territories no longer crossed. Their markets withered. Their culture stagnated. No embargo was declared. But when humanity stopped engaging, the galaxy learned what it meant to be truly alone. For the few who tried to retaliate, the response was clinical. One world launched a preemptive strike on a liberated human colony. The assault ships arrived to find an uninhabited surface. Within minutes, their own systems locked them out. Automated failsafes rerouted them back to their origin, where they exploded precisely 19 seconds after reentry. No survivors. No retaliation. Just a recording broadcast across public channels. Asterisk. Attempt noted. Response complete. Asterisk. By then, humanity had become something else entirely. Not an empire, not a rebellion, but a signal. A concept. They lived not behind walls or borders, but within frameworks, of justice, of memory, of cause. They existed where systems failed, where oppression once ruled, and where silence had taught them patience. They had no interest in ruling the galaxy. But they had ensured no one else ever would. The old species, those who had once voted to enslave Earth, faced extinction not through war, but through entropy. With their power broken, their relevance faded. Their youth emigrated, seeking something more human than home. Their archives, once rich with history, now collected dust while human poetry filled the void. Earth, long forgotten as a backwater, became mythic. A place spoken of with awe and hesitation. The world where fire had been forced to learn restraint, and in that restraint, had outlasted everything. No flag was raised. No anthem played. Just a phrase carved into the heart of every liberated world. We remember who we are. And that was enough.